Good afternoon, beautiful people. This is Karen here. Happy Sunday. We here with an amazing chat. I've been hype about this chat I've been so excited about this chat since we put it together. So of course, this is Karen here, your favorite virtual assistant. And of course, we have two beautiful women with me here with me today. So go ahead, ladies. Gail, you start introducing yourself and then we'll introduce Emily.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to another Sunday chat. It's great to be here. As you know, I'm Gail, your customer experience strategy girl. And today we are so happy to have joining us today Emily Williams. And the topic is going to be very, very interesting. We are talking about black hair and women in corporate America. And I say black hair because as a black person, sometimes your natural hair, the translation for that is black woman, black hair kind of thing, but we mean natural any way you want to wear your hair. And Emily, I want you to start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got into what you're doing right now. So, welcome to the chat. It's great to have you here. And we know we're going to have a very interesting conversation today.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking forward to it. And I always appreciate when you and Karen invite me to be on the show. So thank you. My name is Emily Williams. I'm a strategic coach and consultant. I coach women of color to overcome hostility at work and take care of their careers. And so when my clients work with me, they experience more peace of mind, more power in their lives.
Mhm.
More money at work. I have more than 10 years of experience building up the leadership of women of color to change their workplaces, change their lives, and make their communities better. And I've worked in more than 20 countries to further equity and inclusion.
Okay, great, great.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get the ball rolling, and this is a very interesting question. So, is wearing your natural hair to work still a problem that we faced in 2022? I know there was a lot of conversation about it over the last few years, but today, 2022, is this still a problem for us, or is it not that big a deal? What have you found in what you're doing now?
Yeah, well, it's not a problem for us as Black women, right? The problem is
That
not
is
Very
true.
well said. It's not
That is fact.
no,
us.
not us.
It's not us.
The problem is not us wearing our natural hair. The problem is when others in the workplace use it as a basis for discrimination or a basis for
Hmm.
harassment or a basis to be aggressive, right? That's the
Hmm.
problem.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
also,
Yeah.
before we dive in, I want to say because I don't know, I want to explain people the. I know everybody know what discrimination is, right? But I
Mhm,
think we need to define what hair discrimination is. And I found
mhm,
this
Yeah.
what it means. I looked at the University of New Haven. They
mhm,
had their explanation of hair discrimination, just for people to get a little more insight of what hair discrimination is, right?
mhm, mhm,
So hair discrimination is says unjust social and economic treatment given to a marginalized culture because of their hair. So that is their definition of what's the that not theirs, but the definition of hair discrimination. So I mean, when I tell you this, when I started to really look into the facts, right, and just everything that goes into just hair and black women and hairstyles and men too, because I'm sure men also experience this as well to a certain level, right?
Hmm.
It's really, I mean, this is a conversation, it's really deep rooted conversation, right? Just hair, black hair alone. And I think and I feel like sometimes some people might feel like, well, it's just hair. Like it's not a big thing. But to a black community culture, hair is a big thing for us.
Hmm.
Right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And to be
So
marginalized because of hair.
right.
Because when Karen and I were doing, we were doing our research for today, and Karen was kind of, she was saying, so why is there a stigma around the word nappy? What does nappy
Yes.
really mean?
yeah,
And then you have all of these words now that go with hair that kind of now translate into who you are as a black person. So it was very interesting. So
mhm.
yeah, can you tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about that?
yeah. Well, I think two things. One, when people, I always cringe when people say, well, it's just hair. If it was anything else that like emanated out of the core of our body, we wouldn't say it was just we wouldn't say, oh, it's just an arm, right? Or
Right.
just a leg. We wouldn't say that, right? And so,
Mhm.
our hair is a part of us, it's a part of our body, it's a part of who we are,
Right.
it's a part of our culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important and it matters. And not only that, but it's been used as a basis of discrimination, right, in
Mm-hmm.
the workplace and educational institutions. And we know that discrimination, not only does it impact us mentally, emotionally, psychologically, but it also relates to our socioeconomic status, right? And what we're able to do economically in our lives. So, hair is a big deal. And, if anyone is experiencing discrimination on the basis of their hair, that too is a big deal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and so we ought to treat it as such, right? Um,
Mhm.
and when we think of the word nappy, right, which I'll just say personally, that makes me feel really uncomfortable just to hear the word, to say the word, because, of my own personal experience of, having my hair called nappy, right? And then also seeing it used, as an insult to the other Black women around me, other Black women in my family that I grew up with. So that word has always been a really difficult word for me. And I know for many women. And when we think about the stigma around it, it really dates back to, the times of Reconstruction, right? And post slavery, when
Mm-hmm.
minstrel shows mocked Black hair, right? And using the term nappy in a derogatory way, right? So there is a stigma, right?
Mm-hmm.
There could be efforts to reclaim it, but by and large, the word is still used as an insult and to
Yes.
denigrate Black women's
Yeah.
hairs,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
even Black people's hair, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
the thing is with that, and I was going to lead into my next question because October is Emotional Wellness Month, which is very closely related to mental health. And I believe it's these little things that are really big things for us that affect how we work. So you're going into this organization and they're talking about your nappy hair. I'm just using as an example that may be a little extreme. Or as we were talking about earlier, you have chemically processed hair. I know you want to transition to natural hair. And I think for many of us, that transition phase is one of the worst experiences ever.
Mm-hmm.
I told Karen the best thing to do is buy a wig and hope for the best, and she laughed. But it's a big deal. It's a big
Yeah.
deal. How do you go into work and be your true self and represent your true self? If you have to worry about hair and how people see you and your hair before you even open your laptop or send an email, or it has to be hard, because that should be a simple decision, and for a lot of women it is not. So,
Well,
like, what do you think about that?
yeah, I mean, it should be a decision where it's a personal decision, and what happens at work shouldn't even be a factor in that decision making,
Mm,
right? I mean, that's
Right.
yeah.
number one. Number two, if anyone at work calls your hair nappy, I mean, that needs to be an official claim right away, right? That is like 100% unacceptable. And that's a marker of hostility in that workplace. So if that happens to anyone listening, send me a direct message, and you need to be prepared to submit an official claim against your employer if that is happening at work and it's not being addressed. Um, as it relates to making a transition from, chemically relaxed hair to natural hair, and, how should you handle that at work? Again, the problem is not your decision to transition your hair, right? It's the environment in which you are walking into at work. And so that
Mm-hmm.
needs to remain the focus, right? So making a personal decision, make your personal decision, right? You're entitled to that as a human being.
Right.
um, if things are happening at work, you need to be ready to document those things, right? If people are making comments about your hair that are unwanted, that are negative, if they're using it as a basis not to promote you, for example, those things need to be documented, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I would also say, you know, unfortunately, we're in a world where we as Black women, we have to make these, we have to, this is why when we hear the word nappy or when our hair is denigrated in other ways, it's a traumatic experience, right? Because on one hand, we're forced to choose. Do we just embrace our natural beauty, right? Knowing that that can come with um, hostility and aggression from others in society?
Mm-hmm.
Or do we avoid that negativity and, you know, style our hair in ways that are more quote unquote socially acceptable, right?
Yeah,
Or that are
conform.
more,
Yeah.
or that are more aligned with, the dominant standards of beauty, right? So that in and of itself is traumatic, right?
Yeah.
And we have then the burden of continuing to make these decisions, right? So, you know, and this is why I do the work that I do, right? Because there are mindsets,
Right.
there's things we can do, who we surround ourselves. We
Right.
can surround ourselves with other women of color so that we can go into this workplace and make that transition confidently, right? From
Yeah.
relaxed hair to natural hair and embrace it, right? And even
Right.
if the microaggressions come up, we can have strategies to address those so that we ourselves, can
Mm-hmm.
remain in our full authenticity, which we are entitled to as human beings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
That's
not
true.
be distracted from doing work, because your
Yeah.
work and whether you are productive or not, or how productive you are, how you perform, should not depend on your hair. So,
Exactly.
in terms of a question coming out of what you just said, so
Mhm.
if would you advise anybody who's going into an interview, for example, should a question, and I know this is another radical thing I'm going to ask you, but should I ask you during my interview, so tell me, how do you feel about Black women and natural hair?
How do I feel about Black women
No,
and their
should I,
natural
no,
hair?
should I, if I'm in an interview, should
Oh,
I
oh,
ask the recruiter,
um,
so tell me, how do you feel about Black women having natural hair? Or how do you feel about natural hair at work? Is that a justifiable question? And can that answer help you decide, you know what, do I want to work with this company or not? Is that a red flag for me? Or is that question too upfront to ask them?
yeah, I probably would not advise asking that question directly, simply because I don't think you're going to get a genuine response. I mean,
Mm,
in interviews, employers are generally on their best behavior. And, it may not be the person you're interviewing with who could, in the workplace actually be, a bully or be someone who's prone to harass you because of your hair, because of your race, and because of your gender, right?
mhm,
So I wouldn't say to ask that question. I think it's a better determinant to just go into an interview your full self authentically, right? However, it is that you want to show up in that job every single day, if you are to get it, I would advise then showing up in the interview in that same way. And then really being in touch with how you feel, right?
mhm,
Sometimes it's that
mhm,
we have to tune into the things that aren't being said in
Right.
interviews to really determine what kind of culture we might be walking into if we were to accept that job.
Yeah,
mhm.
that's a good point, Emily. Because
That's a good
even
point.
when even whether it's the interview process, right, or you get the job, if you have a culture where the people there, right, I don't like people touching my hair,
Right.
right? And sometimes people, depending on the culture, they might not understand natural hair because we all have, even within our own communities, our hairs are all different. We all don't have the same texture of hair. So I feel like sometimes it might be acceptable when your hair is more like curly, I guess. But then when you have a certain, what they consider nappy per se, right? Sometimes they find it, some depending on the culture, they might not accept, it's not acceptable, you know. So I find that the culture is important as far as when it comes to where you work at, and people just having boundaries with my hair. Like, don't touch my hair if I don't
Yeah.
ask you, right?
Yeah.
You could ask questions if you're trying to get an understanding of that, which is, I don't have a problem with that. But if you're doing it just to make fun, all right, then I think that's when the problem or the feeling of, okay, maybe this company might not be for me. Because how do you know? Like, sometimes certain insults are kind of indirect, so you don't know whether is this
Yeah.
an insult or this is a compliment to understand. I think
Right.
that's where the confusion kind of comes in sometimes.
Yeah, no, I hear that for sure. Because sometimes the microaggressions can be veiled,
Right.
right? Or the criticism and the insults can be veiled,
Right.
right? Which is confusing. So I think a couple things in response to what you said, Karen. I think number one, I think as Black women, we have to get out of the mentality that we have to continue to make all these changes in order to
Mhm.
just exist at work,
Right.
right? I mean, if you're experiencing microaggressions, if people are making your hair topic of conversation every time
Mhm.
you're in the lunchroom, that's a problem with that workplace. And that workplace needs to
Mhm.
be held accountable for it, right?
Right.
We don't have to spend hours trying to find another job, hours trying to change our hair just so people at work can treat us as human, right?
Right.
So
Mhm.
we have to get comfortable
Yeah.
with the idea of creating accountability where we are so that we can remain on our career paths, right? And so that we
Right.
can live full lives, right? So that's number one. Number two, I really, I really disagree with this notion that, well, people are just trying to understand because they don't understand. Okay, like listen, listen.
Ah, that is so true.
That yeah.
You either understand or you don't
Right.
understand. Why can't you understand?
And you know, and if you're in the workplace, you understand that you just don't go touch someone else. You understand that if you're in the workplace, okay? So it doesn't change
Right.
just because my hair curls, right? That
Right.
doesn't change anything.
Mhm.
Rather, I think people are more commonly acting on and understanding that in their workplace, there will be no consequence for violating Black women in that way, right?
Mhm.
Or objectifying Black women in that way. And when we're talking about, is it a threat? Is it an insult? Right? Is it a
Mhm.
compliment? I mean, all of that ambiguity, right? Ambiguity is 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 part of what is a microaggression, right? It's part of a power dynamic that people are
Mhm.
playing on, that they understand exists, and are betting that there will be zero accountability. So they're taking a chance to say something offensive,
Yeah.
even if it's kind of veiled, right?
Mhm.
So and microaggressions, that's how they function in a workplace, right? So oftentimes people know that they're being aggressive, right? But they know that it's in such, that it's veiled, or that it's in kind of a minor way. So
Right.
they likely, won't get in trouble for it, right? Or that there won't be like proof for it. And, microaggressions, even if they are, if we understand them to be small or micro, they have a really huge impact actually on people's physical health long term. It's linked to heart disease and hypertension. And in the short term, it's linked to increased anxiety and depression, especially when microaggressions are happening at work.
Right.
So, yeah, and so I created an ebook for women of color to actually powerfully stand up to microaggressions so that they aren't having that negative impact on us as we go to work every day, but so that we can also start to get comfortable with creating accountability at work, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Joseph has a good comment. Like, how do we discriminate against natural hair? Like, do you have any examples of what that discrimination might look like in
Sure.
at work?
Yeah. The idea that it's that natural hair is unprofessional, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So when we think about this notion of like quote unquote executive presence, right, which gets invoked all the time when it comes to women of color and whether or not they can be promoted to the C-suite, right? So if a woman of color or a Black woman is wearing her hair natural, right, or she's transitioning from having used relaxers to then going natural,
Mhm.
well, if an employer can say, you know what, we just don't think that she shows up or that she looks like an executive. We just can't envision her in the role, right? So they pass her up. Okay. Those things happen all the time, right? If we think
Mm.
about someone who has locks, right?
Right.
And we say, well, it's just not quite professional enough, right?
Right.
So, those are examples of when hair discrimination comes into play in the workplace.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm sorry,
That's
Gail. Go ahead.
interesting. I was gonna say that's interesting. We have locks, we have braids,
Yeah,
we have all kinds of hair, but it's then to be able to connect the reason I'm not being promoted, or I'm being looked over, or I'm not given a specific role or project because of a professional enough or corporate enough appearance based
Mhm.
on
yeah,
your what you want, your vision for your company and your goals or whatever, versus for me it might be strictly, performing. Am I doing a good job or not? Am I exceeding your expectations?
right, right.
Right.
Yet I'm going above and beyond, and still, I'm here. And Joseph had a follow-on question. He wanted to know if the stigma against hair, is it really against the hair, or is it more against the race? What do you think?
That's a
Yeah.
good question.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's we can't delineate them, right? They
Right,
are, really one and the same, because,
right.
you know, um, our hair oftentimes is also a racial trait, right? And then our practices around our hair and how we care for our hair, how we style our hair, are also culturally linked to our race in most cases.
Hmm.
So, and that's why there is such a debate around hair discrimination, right?
Hmm.
Because these things are very difficult to separate.
Yeah, that's a good question, but that's a very good response because I think it is one. It is the same. You know, it is the same. And then I think Joseph also mentioned, which is true. He read in the news last month that a young girl was refused entering school because her hair was combed naturally, and a high school male student was not allowed to enter his class because he had an Afro hairstyle. And that rejection came from black school principals. So if it's a black principal who one would think as a black person they understand the meaning of your hair and and what it represents, right? Because Viola Davis, not to get off topic, but just to kind of link those two. Viola Davis, I was reading in a Facebook post that she mentioned somebody had asked her, why did you started to wear your natural hair more? And her response was like to her identity because she feels like by wearing a wig or it kind of takes her from who she is, right? And just her self-esteem. So I find that interesting that a black, and it's bringing back to the point, a black principal, he's the one setting the standards in the school system, right? How you should
Mhm.
look.
Yeah.
So, like at that point, as a parent or as a whoever or as a yes, a parent, what can you do when it comes to the educational sense, right? Like it's
Hmm.
just heartbreaking, especially for a child, and as a parent sense, because you try to a sense to teach your kids to love themselves, to accept themselves, right? Accept yourself for who
Hmm.
you are and how you look, but then you go to school and the person who is similar, who looks like you, is this person you telling you your hair, you can't come to class because your hair is not made or because your hair don't look however they think it doesn't look. I found that to be so interesting and how psychologically what that does to a child, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hate to think about things like that, that like racial discrimination starts so young, that like
Yeah.
little teeny tiny little kids experience discrimination at such an early age. I mean, that's really heartbreaking to think about,
Yeah, it is.
but it's a reality.
It is.
Um, and this is why I think the Crown Act is so important, because it
Yes.
says that discrimination on the basis of hairstyle is illegal, right? That it is in fact discrimination. I think, this is going back to Joseph's original question, that, but this was a black principal.
Right.
And I think that that's why it's so important that we understand white supremacy as an oppressive system, right?
Hmm.
Because anyone can internalize white supremacy, right? And when I say white supremacy, I mean the idea that whiteness and white people are superior, right?
Right.
To all other races. Okay, so that's what I mean. Um, that notion is easy to be internalized because we live in a world that supports it, right? When we look at commercials,
Right.
who often is represented, right? White people, how are they represented in a positive light, right? What are our dominant standards of beauty in this country and in the world, right? Straight, long hair, blonde,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so we see these messages are reinforced pretty much everywhere you look, right? And that's why representation, a big reason why representation matters, diverse
Yes.
representation. So we ought not get caught up on, oh, but this was a Black principle, right? But rather, Black people are very susceptible to these narratives and messages about white supremacy, that whiteness is better,
Mm-hmm. Right.
whiteness is dominant, that you have to assimilate in order to succeed, right? We're all susceptible to these messages. So
Right.
it takes, um, an active participation to undo that, right? To undo, to resist internalizing those messages. And
Mm-hmm.
that's important to teach young
Mhm.
people, right?
Mhm.
That's what's
Yeah.
important for us to remember when we go into a workplace. Yeah, we want that promotion. Yeah, we want to make, multiple six figures, but we shouldn't have to compromise who we are in order to do so, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that's
Mhm.
Spell that
yeah.
myth, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's true. And this leading me to my next question that you mentioned the Crown Act just
Hmm.
now.
Hmm.
And I didn't, I heard about the Crown Act, but honestly I didn't know what the meaning, what the acronym stands for. So I figured let me
Hmm.
tell what the acronym is so those who might not know, I don't know.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So it means creating a respectful and open world for natural hair. So that is the definition behind the Crown Act. So
Hmm.
what is the Crown Act and who is it for? Like what is it? What exactly is it?
Yeah, yeah. So the Crown Act, what it does is it says that discrimination on the basis of hair or hairstyle is illegal in employment and in educational institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it has been passed by 17 states. It
Mm-hmm.
has not yet been passed at the federal level. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and so, this furthers or this kind of helps us distinguish between this question that Joseph asked earlier, right? Which is that there's one thing about natural hair, right? This is the way that this hair comes out of my head, right? And afro is the way that someone's hair grows naturally, right? And that is different from, or has been understood to be different than hairstyles, right? Which is, wearing my hair in braids, cornrows, bantu
Mhm.
hats, right? Um, so the Crown Act says that if your hairstyle or your natural hair prevents you from workplace advancement or opportunities, that is also considered discrimination. Previously in US law, it was only the natural hairstyle, right? The way
Mm-hmm.
of your head, right? So the Crown Act furthers that and extends it to hairstyles, right? So someone who's wearing locks, right, can't be told to cut them before they walk for graduation, right? Can't be told to cut them before they participate in sports. And
Right.
it's
Mhm.
precisely because um, really it's inseparable the way that our hair is naturally and our practices around how we style our hair and keep our hair, right? So
Yeah.
it's all racially linked, right?
Yeah.
So the Crown Act extends those protections, right?
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's 50 states we have right in the United States. So only 17 of those actually, pass on those particular states. But even within that, I mean, it's a good thing. I'm happy about that. But that also says that we have a long way to go, right? Because we have 50 states, only 17 of them pass the law. So
Mhm.
I do also wonder how does that play? I mean, I know with the HR section, right? Because I know with law, yeah, it might be passed, but by the time it trickles down to corporations and actually, following through on that law, that's a different story,
Hmm.
right? So I
Yeah.
do wonder how does that play with HR? How do they deal with that? How do they handle when someone comes to them and actually complains on someone because they're being hair discriminated, right? Or can
Yeah.
you be fired because of your hair
Yeah. Yeah.
style,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. In some states, yeah. If you refuse to, if a company says, listen, your cornrows are not professional, we need you to take them down or to change them, and you
Right.
refuse, yeah. In some states that can be grounds for termination.
Yeah, like imagine paying $150 to get your hair braided and tell you gotta take it down the next day.
Right.
I'm just
Right.
being serious.
For them,
That
it's not
would
about the money, but yes,
right,
it is.
right. But
Our
yeah,
Well,
hair
for
but
them
is
it's not about the money.
expensive to maintain.
yeah,
It is.
and that's how it's another disparity,
Yeah,
right? It's like,
yeah.
we have to pay, additional money, spend additional time,
Right.
right? To try to, like,
Yeah.
fit into like these, harsh standards of beauty. And
Yeah.
this is the other
Mm-hmm.
thing we haven't talked much about, but like these standards of professionalism, right?
Yes.
Which
What is
Yes.
that
only furthers,
standard?
I
yeah,
Yes.
it
find that
only,
so funny. I
yeah,
do because sorry, go ahead, Emily.
no, it's okay.
I find that funny. You know why? Because they pick on your right. You mentioned professional based on your hairstyle, but the person who's screaming and shouting and acting foolish at work and starting gossip, because there are some people like that at work. Everybody there just to work and go home. Some people there to start mess and be
Right.
everybody's business and be start confusion within everybody at work. It's
Yeah.
like those people are professionals. So how are you talking about me and my hair when those
Mm-hmm.
people are showing
Mm-hmm.
you blatant disrespect, like no
Yeah.
don't show up on time, lateness all the time, or throw their work on someone else to do those things. I think those things should be the main
Yeah.
focus, not
Because
my
they're
hairstyle.
also contributing to professionalism. It's not only
Yes.
about your
Right.
hair.
Right.
And so you also had a good point, Karen, and Joseph Doe also talked about it. The question is, do you think it's the older generation that has this issue with the hair rather than the younger one? And I'll let you answer that, Emily. Just add my own experience. Well, I'm not a young person. I'm not part of the younger generation, but my son is, and I know when he had his first job, it was a lot of drama, because he has natural hair, and it wasn't about the natural hair. His natural hair wasn't, like cut low and close to his head. He wears it up here, and then he had it bleached, and it had no connection to his performance where his job was concerned, but they didn't appreciate, I guess, the hairstyle, the tattoos. He had his ears pierced, and I'm saying, that needs to change. That needs to change because our young people, they make a valuable contribution to society. And what message are we sending them, if we continue down
Right.
this path of these very strict, ancient, traditional, colonialistic rules
Hmm.
that have
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
Yeah.
relevance really today.
Yeah.
It makes
Yeah.
it just boggles the mind, and it makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, and I hear that, right? I mean, I can think about older generations in my family and the way that they have, really protested my hairstyles or the choices that I made about my hair, right?
Hmm.
But that is different than being in the workplace and experiencing discrimination because of how you choose to wear your hair, right?
Right.
So these
Right.
two things are separate. Like, yes, I mean, I could talk all day about, older generations and, how they feel about my hair,
Yeah. But I
or
think this question was older
their
generation, people that are leading us at work. So like your boss might be from an older generation. They may be in
oh,
their, 60s kind of thing, and you're reporting to this person, or the board of your company may be all made up of these older people who cannot relate to the younger generation. I think that was where he was coming from because yeah,
okay,
our parents
okay.
they well, that's a whole different story really, Emily, about the older
So,
generation, that your family
right,
and your choices. But I
right,
think this question was more from a business kind of concept, an older generation based on who you're working with.
right.
How do
But
you
this
manage
still
that?
remains, but it still remains true, right? That it's fine if you're of an older generation and therefore you have particular views about the way people should wear their hair, or you have particular views about natural hair. And then you have the systemic power to influence, to impact other people's
Decisions, yes.
well-being or engagement at work, right? Which then could also
Hmm.
result in discrimination. So those two things are different, right? So it's one thing, okay, yeah, fine, you have your opinion, great. Okay, human beings have
Hmm.
opinions. That's fine. And maybe this one is linked to your generation. That's fine, right? It's different when you take those opinions into the workplace and you create adverse effects for people who are working there because they don't agree with your opinion or because they live their lives, choose to style their hair in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it's important to make that distinction, right? Who has this power at work, right? If it's the older generation, if it's, mostly male or whatever those identities are, it still should not, that subjective opinion should not then lead to adverse outcomes for people at work, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's so important that the Crown Act extends these kinds of protections because we know that people bring their bias into the workplace, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even though they really should not, right? It's not
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, people definitely do that.
It is true. And
Mhm.
then you might think that you have somebody in your workplace who is the same color as you and should probably understand better, but based on so many different factors, maybe their upbringing, maybe what they were exposed to before, maybe their personal experience where they had to fit into the status quo and assimilate all these things to be successful, which you mentioned before, Emily. So when this person comes to deal with me now, they are going to translate their interpretation of what success looks like onto you and project that.
Exactly.
So you were
Yeah.
wondering, why is this person behaving like this? But I'm sure it's how they were dealt with before and how they had to fit into whatever box to get through, and they're projecting that onto you. So you know that might be something to think about, because the question was asked, it was a black principal, yes, but how was that black principal? What were they exposed to? Who are they answering to? Maybe they're answering
Yeah.
to somebody else and have their rules, and he has to follow the rules. Well, I'm saying he, it could have been a she. So there
Yeah,
are
we
all
don't.
of these little dynamics, that go into these things that I think we need to be aware of, more aware
Yeah.
of, which is why we wanted to have this discussion, all about making
Yeah.
people aware of what's going on, what's out there, how can we deal with the things going on out there better, especially when it comes
Right.
to protecting our mental health and emotional
Right.
wellness. And hair shouldn't even have to fall into that category. It's not like
Yeah.
a stroke or diabetes or cancer.
Right.
We're just talking
Right.
Mhm.
about hair,
Right.
and
Right.
it's a big deal. It's just hair, people. It's just
Well,
hair.
I mean,
No,
It's
yeah.
gonna grow
you
back.
know, and it's just, but it's something that, that it's like a normal part of life,
Hmm.
all have
Yes.
our hair. Our hair grows just like our fingernails grow, just like our
Right.
eyes. So, the other thing, Gail, that I wanted to say in response to, I guess, Joseph's question is, and,
Mhm.
what you were saying about it is that, but, it's an unfortunate reality that sometimes when Black people, when they get to the highest levels of their company or their workplace, they have had to make these sacrifices along the way, and things do change generationally, right? So, I'm under, you know, I know that, like, the extent to which I have advanced in my career or women of color in my generation have advanced in their careers is directly related to the sacrifices and the struggles of the generations before me, right?
Mhm.
That's
Right.
true.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, and at the same time, sometimes when people who have ascended to those heights, right, in their careers and have had to make those sacrifices and have experienced those difficulties, they too can feel like it's an unfortunate reality that there can also be gatekeeping, right? This
Mhm.
notion that,
Yes.
well, I have
Yes.
to work hard, so you got to work hard,
Right.
or
Mhm.
I have to
Mhm.
cut my hair, and, like, that's now the standard, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that can be at play too, which is also, I would say, kind of, related to internalized oppression, right?
Yeah.
That's an unfortunate reality, but it happens.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That one is hard
definitely.
to change, Emily. How are you going to change that? That is years of, I don't know. That's like talking to my great granny about that, and she's looking at me like, seriously? Yeah, because they can't relate. They can't relate. When I think somebody who has been different, raised differently to us, or maybe an older generation person, when they see that young person who has they're living their lives on their own terms. So they have hair how they want it to be. They have, and I'm sorry to say tattoos, but I know here in the Caribbean it's normally hair, tattoos, body piercings. That, we need to change that because it's more the norm now. You have the right. They
Yeah,
have those rights. You should not be discriminating against somebody like that because you can't understand or you cannot accept. Those are not good reasons, really,
Right.
I
Well,
find.
and yeah, and I think it's got to go back to, what kind of team player are you? What kind of colleague are you? What kind of results are you producing, right? Like, what kind of work are you doing? How are you contributing to the workplace? I mean, those are the things that, should be the markers of success at work. Those are the things that should be, what contributes to your advancement, not, what does her hair look like? Or,
right.
Mhm,
does she have piercings? Does she have a tattoo? Because those are the things that are actually, you know, unrelated to, the outcomes that you're producing at work or how you're contributing to your workplace.
mhm,
Those are subjective identity markers.
Yeah, that's true. But I also wanted to ask you because I just noticed a comment that was going to lead me to my next question. Some Beverly Beth Collymore, she stated, "I was once asked by a colleague if I forgot to comb my hair before coming into the office. Was retaliation warranted for such a question?" That was the question that she has. So, lead me to my next question. Something like this happens. What can people do in these circumstances, right? What can we give them three things that they can actually do, or for however much you want to share, for them to be able to handle such a thing like this? Because in time
mhm.
you don't know what to do, and that's true.
Yeah, no, I hear that.
What do you say?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, number one, as Black women, whenever we enter the workplace, we have to be prepared for this. Unfortunately,
Mhm, mhm,
unfortunately, yeah, I know.
and you need to have a personal practice. You need to have a community of other Black women outside of the workplace to support you and hold you down. So that's one, right? Two, um, you have to document that stuff. Okay, you cannot just let it go, right? You know, because it's not ever going to just be one thing. It's like, we can't just give them the benefit of the doubt and hope it's not going to impact us in other ways. No, that kind of hostility needs to be confronted so that it won't continue. And then three, I mean, you can make the determination about how far you want to take it, right? But creating accountability is the like fastest, quickest way to make sure that it stops, right?
Yeah,
So one, have Black women outside of your workplace who can relate, have your own personal practice, be prepared for these things to come. Two, document it. Three, create accountability.
yeah. I'm also gonna put Emily's information, right?
Yep.
Because I was just talking to Gail about this. Sometimes I find that people might be going through circumstances, right? Because right now we're going live. So maybe somebody else is experiencing this. But because you don't know who's looking or who's watching, they won't ask any questions, right? But I will put your information, Emily. So if anybody is experiencing Beverly, you as well, might want to contact Emily to have a conversation, in
mhm.
regards to this
Yeah.
or anything that you feel like when it comes to work related, I should be able to help you with.
Yep.
Please reach out to her because she's the perfect person that could help you with this. Because like I was telling Gail, there are lurkers out there. And I had an experience, I'm not going to share it now, but I had an experience where I had somebody that I used to work, well, two experiences. Somebody that I worked with was looking on my page. And, so it makes me wonder, everybody doesn't feel comfortable to ask questions because you don't know who's looking, what they're going to say, how is that going to retaliate towards your work, right? Based on your
Mhm,
comment. So if you have a situation where you want to share on an intimate level, on a private level, I'm going to put Emily's information in there. Please reach out,
Yep.
reach
mhm.
out.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I just want to add because I think we have some viewers here from the Caribbean as well, which the Crown Act may not, of course, apply to.
Right.
But to go to Beverly's question, I would say that I have found personally just a few things. Sometimes the person making the comment about whether you've combed your hair or not, they try to
Yeah,
get that comment by you by making it seem as though it's a joke, but they're
yeah,
serious. And
yeah,
you need to call them out. You may not. you don't may not feel brave about having to call somebody out, but calling somebody out and letting them know it wasn't appropriate. This is how I felt. I would appreciate if you don't do it in the future, and you make that own note in your journal of your work
Mm-hmm.
to let just to know this is what happened, this who did what, and this is what I said. Because they may, especially if they're from a different culture, they may not know your culture and how you feel, and by extension, at least whether they did or not, they know how you felt. And I would say after that first instance, if it happens again, then I'd have to go to HR. And if nothing happens after HR, then you have a different decision to make. But life is about decisions, and it's about you and how you feel as a person and your identity, and what do you want to preserve with your identity. Do you want your life to be controlled by somebody else and how they feel about your hair, or do you want to go to work as a whole person and be accepted for who you are? And if you're not getting that, well, I'm not telling you to resign immediately. I'm just saying there's a follow up process. And like Emily said, be prepared. I strongly believe as an old girl guide in another life, you should always be prepared. It's like an FAQ for yourself, you
Yeah,
know,
definitely. I agree with
always
Gail.
be prepared.
I
Like,
listen, speak. Listen, don't listen to me because I buy my time. But I just think it's important to speak up for yourself, right? And
yeah.
sometimes we tend to pass things with people because we don't want to ruffle
Hmm.
feathers at work and we
Yeah.
don't
We
want to
don't
come
like
up
conflict. We don't like
disrespectful.
conflict.
But it's
Yeah.
okay. A little heat under behind. It's okay, people. Step. A lot of people just step on. But listen, I don't. I mean, just say it. Call it for what it is. I don't like what you.
Yeah.
I don't like the comment. I think it's disrespectful. And say it. If you say it, if you do this again, I'm going to report you. I
Hmm.
believe in just allow. That's just me. I talk to the person. I explain how I feel, and then what's going to be the next action, right? Because
Yep.
some situation could be a singular situation, and some situation could be where the person has been doing this before you even got there for years, and nobody
And
called them
nobody
out.
said anything. Yeah. I think we
Right.
need to do better at calling out people and letting them
Yeah,
know this is where we draw the line. This is not us. We're not going
And,
to accept this anymore, even if 10 million people before us did.
and
yeah,
that's exactly right, Gail, because it's not us being angry. It's not
right.
us starting a fight. It's us
Angry
having
black
boundaries.
woman.
Yeah, it's us having boundaries and saying,
Yeah.
we're not going to be mistreated in the workplace, right? So we also don't
Hmm.
need to be
Right.
like, oh, we're starting to fight, so we're not going to say anything. No, 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 no. We have boundaries. There's an acceptable way to treat us, and we're going to make that known. And we only are going to make that known because we have to,
Right.
right?
Yes.
If we
Right.
Yes.
don't have to, we wouldn't need to,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I think that that's an important shift, right? That it's
Yeah.
not us starting a fight. It's not us being confrontational. No, we
Hmm.
have boundaries because we too deserve respect at work.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
And the only other thing I would say is, yeah, you probably need to go to HR, but go to HR with a strategy, right?
Mm.
Don't go to
Hmm.
HR thinking,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Yeah.
HR is going to save the day. HR is going to
Right.
be the solution. So often we see that that is not the case, right?
Hmm.
So you also need to go to HR with a strategy.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
what I help. That's what I help women do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, also the link to my ebook is in the chat. That ebook will help you with being prepared for the microaggressions that we inevitably encounter as Black women at work.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I put it before, but I'm gonna put the link there as well for anybody who's interested. Take a look,
Yeah.
read, because at the end of the day, we incorporate, those some of us are entrepreneurs full time and some of us are part time. And if you still are currently employed, definitely, read it, follow, just a guide for you to have. Like for me, I never experienced discrimination at work when it came to my hair, right? But I also wanted to say, at least for me, when I started transitioning my own hair from relaxed to natural, your hair naturally goes through a whole different process on its own. It's whole different transitions, and sometimes I didn't know how to style it. Like I didn't know
Yeah.
what to do
There's
with
no
it. You
control,
know what I mean?
Karen. There's
Right.
no
So
control.
it's like
It's
when
scary.
then you have to go to work, right? So it's like
Yeah.
okay, is there a fear from? Is there is a fear for Black women to maybe put away while they're at work or while they working because they don't know who's gonna judge them and who out of fear because it is a fear that you will be judged because of your current status of your hairstyle that you're going through. you
Yeah.
know?
I
Yeah.
agree.
I think
I agree.
yeah. I think it's a totally realistic fear,
Yeah.
because, um, people feel as though they can comment on it. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, oh, your hair's different today. Like, what did
Right.
you
Right.
Yes, they use that a lot. Oh, that something's different today. Was it? Yeah, they use
right,
that word
right,
different.
right,
Lots of
right.
connotations.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. And that's what's fearful because you just want to be able to go to work and do your job.
Right.
Yep, yep.
You want to be able to
I
have like your
agree.
own process with your hair and your
Yeah.
own process with your identity and how you present to the world.
Yeah,
And we're
definitely.
entitled to that, as human
Yeah,
beings. So I understand when Black women have fear about changing their hair and then going to work. And again, that needs to be on the workplace, right? Like those kinds of comments are unacceptable, right? It's those
Yeah.
are microaggressions, and they're not okay. And so, whether there needs to be training about that or whether there needs to be a
Yeah.
policy about that, workplaces need to do that. Workplaces do need microaggression policies about microaggressions.
yeah,
Workplaces
Yeah.
I agree.
need policies about hair
Yeah.
and presentation and discrimination. They need
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Um,
definitely need a
yeah,
2.0.
and
We
I
need a second
we
part. We
do.
need a second part. You know why? Because this conversation, like, it's gonna be an hour, and I don't want to keep you guys all day, right? But I think that we definitely need to have a second part to this conversation, and also potentially maybe even bring in somebody from HR just to give us on the HR perspective when it comes to DEI training, when it comes to natural hair, just different
Mhm.
aspect of it. And
Yeah.
so I think, I mean,
I was
hopefully,
going to say,
Emily.
yes, I think training is
Yeah,
very important. It's
yeah,
not only about the
definitely.
policy, Emily, it's about
Yeah,
training that person to execute on the policy in a way that is human. Because at the end of the day,
yeah,
as you said, we're human. So you still have to train the person. How do you have this conversation? What do you say? What do you not say? How do
right.
Well,
you navigate that? You know what I mean? Because it's okay to have a policy and people will hide behind the policy.
but
You
see,
Yeah,
know?
I think it's both and Gail, because like what we were talking about earlier, like people know it's not okay to touch somebody else's hair.
yeah,
People
Hmm.
know that.
yeah,
And it's
Are you
like,
sure, Emily? Are you sure? Okay. Okay.
no, people know that. People take
They
advantage.
do. They
I
do.
mean,
They do.
I just think that sometimes it's like, we can talk about like, we can overcomplicate things. And I think sometimes people hide behind trainings. I think trainings can be very effective. And I think people can hide behind them. Sometimes it's like, how do we just create the accountability so that this problematic behavior stops? Right.
yeah,
So I think it's
Hmm.
both and.
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
That's a
both
good
and.
point. That's a
I
good
think it's
point.
both and because you see, we
Yeah,
can't assume that they know how to execute. I'm just saying, so let me just count. Let me just take these boxes. Here's the policy. Here's the training to support the policy. Less, you have no excuse now. Like you need to do the right thing. And I know we're coming up close to time, but I just have one last question, Emily and Karen. Emily, have you seen in your experience companies that employ Black women with nappy hair just to take that DEI box?
Oh, I haven't seen that in my experience. No.
Okay.
No, I
Okay.
haven't.
Okay. No, I was just
yeah.
wondering.
But all right, so we're gonna be, guys, listen, it's gonna be an hour, so I don't want to keep you guys all day
Yes,
here,
it was a
so we're
great
gonna, yeah, it
conversation.
was, listen, I will hope to everybody come back next Sunday because we have a different guest. We're gonna be talking about, we have Leah, and she's gonna be speaking about how to have difficult conversations. I think it's a good topic. I love,
Yeah.
I think everybody, we all can learn how to handle and how to have
Yeah.
those
I think
difficult
it's with teens and
conversations.
young adults, how to have those
There we
difficult
go.
conversations with teens and young adults,
Yeah.
especially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Emily, in closing, any last words? How can people connect with you? What's
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was a great conversation. Thank you.
It was.
You can connect with me in a couple of ways. One, you can follow me on Instagram at Hey Emily Raquel. You can follow me on LinkedIn at Emily R. Williams. Download the ebook. Listen, if you're a Black woman and you're encountering hostility around who you are, what you look like, how you behave in the workplace, speak up, right? You don't have to take that. You don't have to do backflips just to fit in, right?
right?
You can create accountability around that and you can create change. So reach out to me and we'll figure out the best way for you to do so.
Yes, and I'm
Great.
gonna put her. I just put her LinkedIn I'm gonna put her email, and I'm also gonna add her website if anybody want to reach out, or for any reason. Please
Mhm.
do. Don't be shameful, people.
Yeah.
Right.
And put your
Yes.
Instagram
And
too, Emily, in there,
yeah.
Okay, I
so
just
they could
And
connect
thanks to
with you.
everybody who joined us today. Before you go,
Yes.
just make sure you tell us if you were watching us live or if it's on the replay and where you tuned in from. We like to see how far our reach has gotten and where you are joining us from. And Emily is still smiling. We had such a great conversation, Emily. We need to have you back
yeah.
Yes. I would
Yes.
very
definitely get in
soon.
touch with you, Emily, because I would love to have a part two to this.
Hmm.
So let's me and Gail look at everything, and
Yeah.
we'd love to have you back if
And
your
of course, in
schedule
the
permits.
comments, if there's anything any viewer wants us to cover in the future, please make sure to share so that we can include that topic on our next Sunday live chat. And of course, if you want something specific from Emily in a future live conversation, just drop that in the comments as well.
Yes.
And we
That's
will
good.
we will make sure that it happens. I mean, Emily's nodding already. That means she is in. Whatever you come up with, Nicole, she's in.
Really?
She's in. So
I
let's
am
let's strike while the iron is hot because she's in.
in.
Yeah, right. Everybody,
Nice.
you have an amazing Sunday, and of course, being tomorrow being Monday, have a great week because it's Monday.
Yeah.
Y'all take care, guys. Bye,
Bye.
guys. Everybody,
Thank
take
you.
care.
Bye. See you later.